Georgia O'Connor here. Big up Julius. Ring IQ. Welcome to the relay.
Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Is the four kings, right? We were calling them Haney, Teofimo Lopez, Gervonta Davis, Ryan Garcia.
Yep.
Who are the ones that are finally fighting each other? Or the ones that everyone had the most questions about? Most questions about Gervonta Davis's resume, and the most questions about Ryan Garcia's, his general love of the sport, or what exactly he is. I think that's kind of funny. That's kind of ironic that out of all those four guys, that these two are the ones that are going to fight each other first.
It's really not that big a mystery. I always figured that before Gervonta Davis would fight Shakur Stevenson, or Devin Haney, or even Teofimo Lopez, any of the other four kings, as Dan Canobio, CompuBox's Dan Canobio, described them, I always figured these two would end up fighting each other before they'd end up fighting any of the other guys at or around these weights. In truth, it's Dan Canobio's assessment of these four fighters: Teofimo Lopez, Gervonta Davis, Ryan Garcia, and Devin Haney.
Four kings, right? We were calling them
The Four Kings. This conversation piece by way of Dan Canobio and CompuBox and Chris Algieri, it accents something that we talked about here on the channel, something that we touched on, how sometimes the boxing media, the journos, they set the bar far too low with their own fanboyisms. I almost felt like Dan Canobio was chastising the other fighters, the other young guys that had not fought each other yet, in spite of what they had accomplished in their careers that neither Gervonta Davis or Ryan Garcia. Devin Haney became the lightweight division's undisputed champion. Undisputed. Teofimo Lopez, he became that division's unified Ring Magazine and Lineal champion before him. I don't think that's anything to sneeze at. In fact, I think that before you go calling either Gervonta Davis or Ryan Garcia kings in this sport, kings of any kind, perhaps these are accomplishments and accolades that they should have amassed them already, if you're going to go as far as calling them the quote-unquote four kings. Ryan Garcia hasn't even fought for a full title yet. My previous video, I talked about how the line that separates the journalist, the actual pundit, from the fan, particular to this conversation, the fanboy, how that line has been delineated over time due to the journalists themselves. That you could directly attribute the rise of many channels here in the YTBC, channels that often spread misinformation and skewed views on the sport. You can attribute the rise of those kinds of channels to stuff like this. When the line between the actual journalist and the fan is delineated over time as a result of the actual journalist behaving like a fan. No objectivity. Before you know it, fan-driven media will be indistinguishable from actual media and actual journalists, since they both seem to behave the same way. No, that's not a good thing. Actual media and actual journalists are supposed to, at least ideally, be held to a higher standard, a more objective one. When covering the sport they are. In the moment, Dan Canobio's parallel, Four Kings, the Four Kings, quote-unquote, in the moment, it seems innocent enough. But when you're talking about the Four Kings, when you're talking about the original Four Kings in this sport, the sport of boxing, you're talking about Sugar Ray Leonard, you're talking about Roberto Duran, you're talking about Tommy Hearns and Marvin Hagler. That's what you're talking about. Right. That's where that comes from. And when you go as far as calling Gervonta Davis one of this era's Four Kings, Gervonta Davis? What? Ryan Garcia? Ryan hasn't even fought for a world title yet. Is it really appropriate to dub him a king in the sport of boxing of any kind? Is that? In the moment, it seems innocent enough, but it's in the moment that this starts. It's in the moment that this happens, as fanboyism and fanboying, these are guys that are slaves to the moment. They're not objective. This is just one example. It's not even the most crude. It's not the most brazen example of what I'm talking about, but it is an example. Ryan Garcia, God bless him, his notoriety here today, it's not because of anyone that he beat or anything that he did. Put simply, the only reason this kid's as well known as he is here today, given where he is in his career, is because of his social media following. So when someone with a bit of stature, like a Dan Canobio, calls him a king of any kind, even in passing, the audience, absorbing that, may start to think of him as one, but for the wrong reasons. I'd sooner call Shakur Stevenson one of this era's Four Kings because he's already been a champion, a two-division champion, going on campaigning at his third weight. I would sooner assign that designation to a Shakur Stevenson than a Ryan Garcia. In fact, I would sooner assign that designation to a Shakur Stevenson than a Gervonta Davis, because Gervonta Davis is not a multi-weight champion. It's almost like they're rewarding him for picking up these secondary titles at 2 other weights. Because there are those out there who like to call him a 3-division champion, and 3-division champion, that's what he ain't. Let's make that clear. The version of the WBA title that Gervonta Davis currently holds, the one he has held since 2019, that's a baby belt. That's a secondary title. The only thing that's good for is to be used as a segue to fight for the full title. Gervonta Davis has never been a full champion at either lightweight or super lightweight. When Gervonta Davis got the lightweight, he didn't beat the man to beat at lightweight when he got there. He won a secondary title from a past it Yuriorki Gamboa, a vacant secondary title. He didn't even win it from someone of note. At super lightweight, when he got there was already an undisputed champion crowned at super lightweight. He didn't fight him. He didn't fight Josh Taylor. He fought Mario Barrios. Do you see what I mean? Gervonta Davis may be a very popular young fighter, and the same may apply to Ryan Garcia. It applies to him too, but don't confuse their popularity with accomplishments. Moreover, don't present them as such. It is up to the journalists, the actual pundits in the sport, to make that distinction clear to the consumer, to the fight fan, that while Ryan and Gervonta are very popular and their fight is a nice little fight, it doesn't crown the best lightweight in the world or the best super lightweight in the world. It doesn't. They're fighting at a catch weight of 136 pounds. You call these 2 guys kings? You're giving it away too easy. Even if the fight between them is a high-profile fight and an intriguing fight, it doesn't crown the best 135-pounder in the world or the best 140-pounder in the world. Doesn't. Maybe it crowns the most popular. Maybe that. You see, what I'm getting at is the media themselves, the actual media, the actual journalists, the actual pundits in the sport, they have to hold themselves to a higher standard in order to effectively make those distinctions and communicate to the boxing fans. Communicate that, because that's their job. That's their role in all of this, and when they become slaves to the moment, the same way that a fan would, well, suddenly what they've got to say and what a fan has to say, it's indistinguishable. But it's not supposed to be. Now, as stated, Dan Canobio's parallel really is one of the more innocuous examples. There are more brazen examples of what I'm talking about, but in light of today's press conference between Ryan and Gervonta, it seemed fitting to highlight. To use this one, you explain it to me. What has Ryan Garcia done at either lightweight or super lightweight that anyone should think of him as a king or call him one? What has he done? This segment will be a part of a series of segments where I highlight just what I'm talking about. Sometimes the journos in the sport of boxing behave a little bit too much like the fans in the sport of boxing. They get carried away, and that, in effect, delineates the line that's supposed to separate them.
I don't feel like the fight's going to happen. You've just heard it from Usyk's promoter there himself, saying that 60-40 to the winner. How much more fairer can you get? Tyson's completely priced himself out with the Saudis, so he's now shot himself in the foot, and he's doing anything he can, in my eyes, to avoid this fight. It's funny how he gives Anthony Joshua 24-hour deadlines, and he's quick enough to have back and forth with Manuel Char on the internet, but yet he's gone complete radio silence with Usyk. But yet this is only a pumped-up middleweight, apparently, who's got no power, and he'll stand him on his head. So
well, I don't think Tyson's scared of anyone. I don't think Tyson's scared of fighting anyone. That's not the issue here. It's a principal issue on business and finance.
If that's not the issue, then what's the hold up? He's completely pricing himself out. He's never going to come out and openly say, "Oh yeah, I'm scared of him," because you've been running his mouth for the past 8 months saying that he'll fight for free. If you remember correctly, the Derek Chisora fight was a warm up for Usyk. He called him in the ring along with Joe Joyce.
Do you not think it's more about principle of I'm the main man and I'm getting 60% and you're getting 40, like it or lump it, rather than I'm scared of fighting you?
Well, that's the whole reason why he priced himself out of the Saudi deal, because he wanted double than what AJ got. You know what I mean? And they laughed at him because they see it as he's not a big commercial draw, as he likes to think. Adam Catchwell said it well this morning. Tyson Fury is not a superstar that his inflated ego likes to think he is.
Well, that may be true, but he certainly knows he's not scared of anyone.
Do you think this fight will happen at all, David?
Never.
I keep telling you guys, if something happens to this fight, this week goes by and it collapses, the responsibility for it, the blame, will be placed at the feet of Tyson Fury. The people themselves, they've had enough.
You can't trash a guy as much as he's been trashing Alexander Usyk in full view of the public eye. You can't trash a guy that much, then raise this big of a stink over what you get paid to fight him.
If he's just a middleweight with no power, if he's just a tick over for you and you walk over him as easily as your fans think you'll walk over him, then you shouldn't be raising this much of a stink to begin with. Why can't you fight him just as easily as you fought Derek Chisora last year?
I thought that was the whole point of that fight. You needed a tick over in between fights en route to the Usyk fight. Now we're hearing the Usyk fight might collapse,
making that Derek Chisora trilogy even more pointless, if you can believe that.
The people have had enough and they're letting it be known.
Tyson Fury's fans, his core supporters, have a habit of making ghost accounts and alt accounts by way of social media in order to defend his honor against anyone who disparages him.
It's an exercise in futility because it's not going to work. It's not going to change anybody's mind.
Even a few of the journos over there in the United Kingdom, a few of the pundits, they might be sweet on Tyson Fury. Sweet enough that they pull their punches.
Yes, some of them, but not all. Take a look at Adam Catterall.
Listen to what he had to say about it.
That we've been waiting for, before the one that we've been waiting for, before the one that we've been waiting for. Who's the common denominator? The common denominator is Tyson Fury. Let's be straight about this. This deal was done on Usyk's side with Saudi Arabia because what was happening is that they were paying two separate site fees. They were going personally to Alexander Usyk, they were going personally to Tyson Fury. Alexander Usyk agreed his deal at the back end of January. It was done. He was in on the fight. Tyson Fury is under Nard. He's gone back and forth with Saudi Arabia. And the deal ended up not getting done. That's why we've landed in the situation now where we're talking about Wembley on April the 29th. So therefore, it's a different financial business model. It's not site fees anymore. We're talking about gate and pay-per-view revenue. So now we're talking about a split between the whole deal. And Alexander Usyk rightly wants 50-50 because he's the unified heavyweight champion of the world and he's the undisputed cruiserweight champion of the world, Olympic gold medalist. His pedigree's there. It is a super fight. I think majority of fans would agree it's a 50-50 split. Tyson Fury disagrees that it's a 50-50 split. And he wants a larger piece of the pot. If you remember a time just before the Wilder 3 fight, there was a deal on the table for Tyson Fury to be fighting Anthony Joshua. The amount of money that was in that fight at that time was astronomical. We're talking 75 million quid. So therefore, in the back of his mind now, Tyson Fury's got a monetary value that he's worth that. No, he's not. That fight was worth that at that particular time. So now what we're finding is that obviously when he's fighting people like Dillian Whyte and Derek Chisora, he's getting an 80-20 split on big stadium fights. And he's, you know, people are coming out to see him fight. He's valuing this fight with Alexander Usyk as one of those fights. It's not like that at all. This is a super fight. This is a super fight between two even protagonists going into it. Like I'll keep saying till I'm blue in the face. Yeah, Tyson Fury sold stadiums out and whatever, but that's not that this. This is now a 50-50 fight for the undisputed championship of the world. If this does not get over the line, it's on Tyson Fury and Tyson Fury alone. It's embarrassing for him. He keeps telling everybody there's a proper fighting man. He keeps telling everybody I'll fight this guy for free. Well, put your money where your mouth is, man. Let's do it. Let's get this fight over the line.
It's not just me saying this stuff anymore. That Tyson Fury ain't everybody's sweetheart the way his fans make him out to be. That while he did do good numbers with Deontay Wilder in their trilogy, he did that with Deontay Wilder, not off his name alone, and what he did with Dillian Whyte in the United Kingdom.
He didn't do that by himself.
Dillian Whyte helped him sell that fight because Dillian Whyte, at least in the UK, he is a box office fighter. He's had several pay-per-views there, sold out the O2 Arena with Joseph Parker. People know him, and people know Usyk.
The Bellew fight, the Chisora fight, the two Anthony Joshua fights. You think they don't know this guy? You can't play the Johnny Foreigner angle.
They know him. Those two Anthony Joshua fights sold 1 million pay-per-view buys, a little over 1 million pay-per-view buys each.
They know him.
More importantly, they know that he doesn't often have these kinds of problems, have these kinds of issues making a fight, but Tyson Fury...
From Adam Catterall's mouth to your ears, Tyson Fury is the common denominator with that kind of stuff.
You can't pull the wool over anybody's eyes with this one. If this fight falls apart, it'll be on him.
Now, who are you going to offer up as a substitute? What, you going to fight Chisora again? Another Wilder fight.
There are two. Just 2 champions left in today's heavyweight division. It's just you and him.
Nobody else.
As long as Tyson Fury been carrying on about how he's a proper fighting man, not a businessman. He's a Spartan. He doesn't care about money. For how many years now?
Long enough that the novelty has worn off and the people have had enough.
You're not going to convince them that Usyk has all of a sudden become this money-hungry guy, because that's not what his track record shows, but yours.
It's gonna be hell to pay. You don't fight this fucking guy.
And finally, in men's welterweight news, Showtime had Stephen Espinoza on making Crawford versus Spence. I'm not going to give up until both of them are retired.
Sounds good.
Stephen Espinoza, was more optimistic than not in seeing Spence versus Crawford, that fight, if not next, then sometime down the line. Espinoza stated unequivocally that he would not stop trying to find a way to make the fight work, so long as both fighters remain. I would say 6.5 out of 10, Espinoza said when asked to put a number on Spence versus Crawford happening. I think I'm more optimistic than not that it does happen. I know there's still interest. I know there's still a desire on the Spence side. I believe Crawford when he says he's interested as well. As long as no one has given up, and I don't think anyone has, there are certainly obstacles. The Rocha fight, the sanctioning body ordered being one of them.
Spence is under orders to fight Keith Thurman. Terrence Crawford is under orders to fight Alexis Rocha.
At this point in the juncture, both champions, the only 2 remaining champions at welterweight, they're both under orders to satisfy mandatory challengers. So as far as Stephen Espinoza's optimism, we've been hearing about his optimism since last year.
Optimism in and of itself won't suffice.
We are now, with this fight, where we always were, and that is nowhere.
Pretty much.
But I'm not giving up. I'm not going to give up until either one of them or both of them are retired, said Stephen Espinoza.
Sounds good.
The timing for these are talks, the resurgence of them, I should say, is very convenient. At a time when Terrence Crawford makes a guest appearance on the major feature film Creed 3, he's walking the red carpet, he's getting seen, he's talking to people, rubbing elbows with A-listers, this story comes out.
And I don't even know that I should believe it. I'd sooner believe that this is just them trying to keep Errol Spence Jr.'s name out there, keep him relevant.
Keep dangling that carrot in front of the fight fans' faces, a lot of false hope and empty promises.
You've still got a Keith Thurman fight that you're trying to sell. A Keith Thurman fight that, let's be honest, nobody's asking for and nobody's excited about.
But if you can convince the boxing community at large that Keith Thurman fight will be a segue to a Crawford fight,
that it's not for nothing,
perhaps that might entice some of the more gullible members of the boxing community to tune in and purchase the pay-per-view. Stephen Espinoza added, the negotiations have never really stopped. They took a pause. There's still conversations ongoing, and until one of the guys says, I'm done fighting, I don't think anybody's giving up at this point.
Listen, at this point, until both boys are in the ring and the opening bell sounds, I won't believe it until I see it.
At this point in the juncture, that's the feeling. This has gone on far too long, and the welterweight division as a whole, has stagnated over time because Errol Spence Jr., its only unified champion.
He's got 3 of the 4 major titles, and this guy has only fought once in the last 2 years, 2 in the last 3.
If he's the quote-unquote big fish of this division, the biggest name, what does that say about this division that the man is sparsely active, that you rarely ever see him?
What does it say?
And how much excitement does he create on a schedule like that, in tandem with all of Stephen Espinoza's empty promises, what seem like empty promises about this fight, this Crawford fight that's been approximately, 5 going on 6 years in the making?
We've seen 2 Joshua versus Ruiz fights, 2 Joshua versus Usyk fights,
3 Fury versus Wilder fights, and 3 Canelo versus Golovkin fights.
Hell, even Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia is supposed to go down before this thing.
2 Charlo versus Harrison fights, 2 Charlo versus Castaño fights.
Oh, while we wait for Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence to fight once.
Enough with the empty promises. At this point, it's a running gag.